alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bashir Yatsab, you want to ask a question or two? Did you start? Yes. You can start. Unless there is someone else who wants to say two things.
Assalamu alaikum, Zusab. Zusab, it's a question when I'm talking to my friends concerning the unity of God. How can I explain to them in simple language, explain the unity of God and then lead them toward Islam and the need of religion and this, because they're not really interested in religion.
The Holy Quran has explained it in the simplest possible way by discussing nature as we observe it and drawing our attention to the fact that there is a singularity in nature to be observed all over. In whatever form you study the nature, in whichever field you study the nature, there is a singularity and no duality, no question of a trinity at all. And this is a fact which is understandable and which should be understandable by the Europeans who have made such advances in science. So tell them you study the nature in physics, the world of physics, in the world of chemistry, in the world of cosmology and universe as such, the intricate phenomena of subatom world and study of the universe as in the largest scope, also the study of matter as such, study of animal life, human life. There is always a consistency and singularity. So that cannot be born if there were three gods. It's impossible. There is one single master. Nowadays people are thinking in the advanced physical terms of physics, of a single field as well. All forces should combine into one single field. Well, that although does not bear on religion as such, but the concept as presented by the Holy Quran is in conformity with this concept as well, that there has to be one single character to the whole universe, and that is an established fact now beyond any shadow of doubt. So why should there be two gods or three gods? Apart from that, in the same instance, the Holy Quran has pointed out that if there were two gods, more than one God, then there would have been some clash, some difference of opinion, some chaos created somewhere, and that we do not observe anywhere in the world. Now if they say, well, they behave like gods, not like human beings, they don't quarrel, the point is their will is one and the same. If it is one will, why three bodies? So if they say no, there are not three bodies, three persons at least, but with one singular will, which is entirely in agreement with each other's will. So that is what we call unity, oneness. Why to have three persons with one will put together, and what would be their share, respective share in that one will? One will requires a single being in the ultimate analysis. That is ego, ana. And this is why the Holy Quran starts with Alif Lam Mim, Anallahu Alamo. I am the ultimate me, and there is no other me as compared to this. So that singularity of universe leads us to one single God. If not, where is the evidence in the nature? If they demand logical proofs, we have the same right to demand the logical proofs from them. These are our proofs. If they are not acceptable, let them prove the Trinity from nature, from creation. There has to be some stamp of Trinity if there were three gods. What is the proof? So total lack of proof on the part of the adversaries, and a very solid, consistent proof, scientific proof on our part which we advance, that should suffice to prove this fact to every sane man. Right?
Yes, exactly. Huzur Sahib, it's concerning the Miraj.
Miraj?
Miraj of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi
Or
Wasallam.
Miraj?
Miraj.
Achha, yes.
Forgive my
Yes,
telephone.
please.
So when the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came very near to God, how do we understand this, the actual, because he was not physically near to God, he was spiritual, but
Yes.
God is everywhere.
Have you ever gone closer to a friend of yours or not? Closer to any person? Have you? Never? To your mother, to your father, to your sisters, to your friends, those to whom you are introduced,
Physically, yes.
do you stay at the same distance right from the start till the end, or do you seem to gain some distance towards them, towards some of them, some distance towards some of them and some distance away from some of them? Do you ever feel that?
Sometimes.
Huh?
Yes.
You do. So why shouldn't Rasulullah Sallam feel the same with relations to God? That is exactly a phenomena which does not require explanation in space-time. It requires explanation in one's inner feeling and one's knowledge of the person and one's bondage with that person and closeness in relations of love. That is the phenomena which has been described. So at that time, you know, sometimes you love your parents all right, but sometimes there are moments when you are closest to them. And sometimes you know your friends for ages and yet you don't know them enough. And suddenly one day they dawn upon you. You begin to understand. Sometimes this happens with enemies and sometimes with friends. So that final moment of dawning of God's attributes with the grandest flash, that was Miraj.
Exactly.
Yes, now you at last. Assalamu
Assalamualaikum Hazur.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah.
Hazur, I got a humble suggestion first, and that is, Hazur, the need is felt for the publication of a book which to my knowledge is not available as yet, which could be used by mothers as bedtime stories for children, a two-story book for young generation, and a course in the Ahmadiyya primary schools in the religious classes.
Just one single book or various small books on various subjects?
Next sentence explains, Hazur, but I mean.
Correct, yes, please.
I mean a book giving in short the lives of prophets, at least of those mentioned in the Holy Quran. The size of the book in mind is just a pocket book, and also essays should be as short as possible, giving their period in history and the important events in their lives.
This work, I think, has already been undertaken while we were discussing the syllabus for an Ahmadiyya school for children, which we are going to start in Huddersfield. This question came up, and I instructed the committee to produce literature in this regard of the at least belong to the minimum standard of literature produced for Christian children all over the world. And I remember telling them about the various subjects which should be discussed. But it should not be one single book. It should be a series of children's small books, beautifully published and written in the simplest possible language, covering a wide area apart from the stories of the prophets. Also, it should tell them the persecution the followers of the prophets met, and the short hints on their age and geography and all that. So children can absorb a lot of information. Only we withhold information from them, unfortunately thinking ill of their capabilities and believing that you shouldn't overload with them information. While the scientists tell us, who have investigated on the brain, that the age up to 12 is the most fertile age for the brain to receive messages and record them. And a child can even be taught 6, 7 languages, and he can speak those languages like his mother tongue equally well. But it's the fault of the parents not to provide them with such opportunities. In fact, the scientists tell us that that part of the brain which is situated, I think, on the right hemisphere of the brain, which is particularly specialized for languages. If it is not developed by 13 years, then it ceases to work altogether, then it will not receive any messages in future. So those children, for instance, who have been brought up in complete lack of communication, in an atmosphere of complete lack of communication. For instance, some children were lost to jungles and they were retrieved later on. They were in fact looked after by some animals, and they were retrieved much later at the age of 15 or 16, for instance. And also some children who had some diseases, some misfortune right at the time of birth, and they could not hear anything. But later on, their hearing was restored after the age of 13 years. Now, despite the fact that then they could hear, they could not learn any language because that system was not activated before 13 years of age. So that shows that we should try to teach our children much more than we do. Allah has provided them with so many things. This is why people who have not learnt a language during their childhood, it's very difficult for them really at an advanced age to speak like the people of that land speak the language. For instance, we from Pakistan and India, who have been not taught by Britishers, the Englishmen, it's very difficult for us to acquire that style of language, that tempo of the language. You can learn the pronunciation all right, but you can't gain that tempo, that style. You would always be immediately discovered by the people of that country to be foreigners. But our Pakistani children who have been brought up here, they speak English like the Englishmen, all right. So if you teach your children religion extensively while they are children, over and above what they are taught in the schools, without any sacrifice on the part of the ordinary secular knowledge they are obtaining, they would still be getting useful religious information, and there will not be any point of sacrificing one for the sake of other. They can gain both at the same time. So this is what should be done. They should be given information scientifically. And for instance, in the children's book, which we find in our country, a lot of information is not given at all. The geography of the country, the historical events, and who else was there at that time. What was happening at that time in China when a prophet was born, in Egypt, for instance. So all these relative information should be given so that a wider canvas is being painted in their minds. And when they grow up with a larger vision. Unfortunately, again, this is the most unfortunate defect of our education system in the subcontinent, generally speaking, that generally, even with regards to secular teachings, they don't broaden the canvas of the child's information. So we grow up with that limited scope, that limited spectrum of knowledge. For instance, all of us who are sitting here, we would never think of Adam while the rest of the world did exist. The rest of the world is in total darkness as far as we are concerned. And when we speak of Jesus Christ, we don't know what's happening elsewhere. Most of us don't know even what was happening in his own country. Only that channel of information that was revealed to us by the Holy Quran as a specialized subject. We have been taught that much, but we have not been taught about the general phenomena, what was happening in the world, and so on and so forth. So a broader spectrum book or a series of books should be prepared for children and interestingly written, but in very simple, plain language. Lives of the prophets, lives of their important companions, and introduction to the opponents, and the general balance of powers at that time, how the odds were against them, and what were the odds against them, and where have they gone ultimately. All these things should be deeply imprinted in the minds of the children right from the start. So thank you for pointing out and reminding me. I will find out whether such work has been undertaken or not. Also earlier I pointed out here that I should like to introduce such stories myself, and if I was reminded in time by the private secretary whom I had this point noted, I should like to give a demonstration of how the Prophet should be introduced to children. And also, at the same time, I should like to give reference to the similar books written by non-Ahmadi scholars, so that the children are told from the childhood, right from the beginning, what is the difference between Ahmadiyyat and non-Ahmadiyyat. What they might have grown into if they had been born among non-Ahmadi houses. There is absolutely a difference of antipodes between the two approaches. So much so that my cousin Bhavani was telling me this morning that there was a series of programs on the lives of the prophets in Pakistan television, and the hocus pocus that was being fed to the people and the absurdities which were told created such strong reaction from the masses, from the intelligentsia at least, not masses but general public belonging to a slightly higher group of education, that the government had to stop that series. Everything stupid and rotten was being said, and exaggerated claims about miracles, and everything was being distorted out of shape. So this is their concept of prophets. So to make it crisp and spicy, a few instances should be quoted here and there, that look here, this is as we infer from the Holy Quran, and this is what the non-Ahmadis believe, and for that there is no base. So that would inshallah help our children living in the Western societies in particular to be well guarded against future influences from secularism. So that much for your information, for your introduction. Now begin with your questions at last. But have you got any time now left? Yes, we have. Huh? Enough time. Yes, yes. No, about an hour. About an hour. The time for prayer would start. 9:40. No, what's it? 9:20. at 9:25 we can say the prayer. Yes. No. Achha. We have about 45 minutes.
Teachings of Islam give certain allowances if a certain commandment is beyond human power or extremely difficult to abide by. In this connection, I would like to know if there is any a concession in fast for such students who find it difficult to study properly if they are keeping fast.
Are there such students? First of all, this has to be established.
Meeting so many students, as you know better.
You are framing the question, you should know.
I think there are maybe students who find it
Find out.
During the examination, especially examination days.
Yes. If the general principle applicable to this, to every such situation is this, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wusaha. This is why those laborers who have to work very hard for earning their bread, otherwise there wouldn't be any source of livelihood for them. During the extreme summer days in Pakistan and India, for instance, in other hot countries, they are permitted to postpone their fasting till such times as will not be too much for them. So hardship, as I explained in my Jummah sermon on this subject, is not the object or the goal of fasting or any other worship. The goal is purification and ultimate creation of love and a sense of submission to the will of God. So that should be achieved, and no such worship should be undertaken as is beyond one's capabilities at a time. So that general law would cover, but that should not give ground for excuses. That should not create ground for lame excuses. In fact, such decisions can only be rightly or wrongly taken by the persons concerned. Even the parents cannot take such decisions, because each child is built differently and each child knows his own capabilities better than the parents do. So if a child can keep the fast and read all right without a substantial loss, then he should continue fasting. I never found it at all interfering with the studies at all in any way or any other activities. Children are a strong people, strongly built human beings, even stronger in many regards. Physical exercise is also possible during fasting, quite extensively too. When I was a student here, I used to play squash in the evenings, and it's a tough game. And I remember during the Ramadan, I used to play sometimes 2 hours for 2 hours or 3 hours continuously, and that didn't kill me. It was all right. So why do you expect small things from your children? Why don't you make them fragile and small-minded about these things? Try to make them courageous and infuse confidence into them. And I think this is just a lame excuse. As far as the children are concerned, a majority, of course, among them would be capable of fasting as well as studying, with some hardships. Yes, but why not? Everybody else has to go through some hardships for the sake of earning some better qualities. So that is a part of life.
I used to play tennis up to the age of 17,
Mashallah.
even in Ramadan.
Even in Ramadan, look. So, old age is in some ways similar to childhood. But in this regard, It is harder on older people, much harder than children.
I walk about 3 miles, had walking these days also.
MashaAllah.
3 miles
Yeah.
a day after 11 years.
But you appear to be 70 to them, even now, so you better tell your age.
It's 85.
Huh?
85 only.
Imagine now, imagine. 85. And there was one gentleman in Sindh who is still with the grace of Allah alive. A few years ago, there was a debate about his age. And he thought he was about 125 years old. He remembered the days of Ghadar and all this. So his grandson was, in fact, he's called his grandson, but he's not his grandson. He was the younger brother of Chaudhry Muhammad Ali's grandfather. So he is called a grandfather as well, but not much difference between the ages of the two. So he's almost like a grandson, real. He is about 70. So his grandson is 70, he should be imagining. So Chaudhry Muhammad Ali Sahab told me, after many calculations, that the minimum age should be about 115. So at that age, he walked from Nasrabad to Kundri, which is 6 miles, and walked back as well.
Professionals.
Huh?
Do you know?
Uh-huh. Simple, plain farmer with a very simple life he has led, but he walked straight as well. And whenever he went for long distances, he always took his shoes off and put them here, like this. Then he was easy.
I wouldn't like
I said, yes, that's the difference, That would add another 3 miles to you.
3 miles, that's during the Ramadan.
Yes.
Otherwise, I walk for about 5-6 miles.
MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. Yes. And here there are youth, among them, one of them at least I remember, who walked with me during the morning walks for 5 miles and decided never to come again. Yes, he said it's sufficient for 1 year. And Mir Sahib has been walking 5 miles daily, 6 miles even daily, at the age of 85 with the grace of Allah, alhamdulillah.
That gentleman that is sitting here,
Yes, please. Next question.
Would Hazur kindly explain what is the meaning of Arsh of Allah Ta'ala, and also kindly advise us how it is described in the Holy Quran and Ahadith of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam?
I have already spoken on Arsh at quite a few occasions, and that should suffice. During these sessions, I have already spoken on this subject. While discussing the Miraj, on that topic, I remember having told what Arsh meant, and I think that should suffice. Next question.
Hazur, anybody else want to ask, then I can continue.
Fine?
If anybody want to ask,
No, you continue, please. Inshallah, we'll dispose of you quite quickly now. Yes?
would Hazur kindly explain what was the method of performing Hajj before Islam, and what changes were made by the Holy Prophet
Yes.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam after Allah Ta'ala made Hajj obligatory for Muslims?
Quite. That's a good question. The fact is that there have been many eras in which the style and customs and rites of Hajj have been changing, influenced by the various people who occupied the position of authority in Mecca at that time. When it started, as far as I investigated, Hajj is known to have started long, long ago. It's not only a tradition inherited from tradition left by Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam or his son Hazrat Ismail, but there are some references from which we can infer that the tradition of Hajj went much, much further, much much earlier, yes, further back in time. For instance, the vision of Hazrat Ibn Arabi tells us that he once in a vision he saw some people performing Hajj who did not appear to be people like other human beings. There was some difference, in their style and habits. And while the introduction was being, they were being introduced to each other, he mentioned Hazrat Adam, that let me recollect the whole thing. It was the alien, to him he was an alien, who introduced himself, and Hazrat, who mentioned Adam first? You remember that? I think it was Hazrat Ibn Arabi who says that I mentioned Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, and he said, which Adam you are talking about? He said, which Adam? We know only the Adam who happened to be so many thousand years ago. We said, no, we are the children of an Adam who lived here about 40,000 years before. And we used to perform Hajj like you do, and we used to make the circuits. So this is a reference which is not enough to prove a point, but it's an oblique reference to what might have happened. Had it been just that, it would not have gained any serious importance. But Hazrat Ibn Arabi, while quoting this vision of his, also points out that this vision of mine reminded me of a tradition of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which said that there were scores of Adams, various ages, at various ages, and the beginning of those Adams we don't know, but there were many before, even before 40,000 years. So he also mentioned the time. What was the time mentioned by Hazrat Ibn Arabi in the other referring to that tradition of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I think 40,000 is the one he mentioned himself about his own encounter with those people. He mentioned the word 40,000, figure 40,000. But that reminded him of a tradition of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which it was said that many Adams have come before, and the time was of a larger scale, much larger scale than this. Yes.
The author of Sirat al-Halabiya recited also the tradition and this word of dunya.
Yes, it's Sirat al-Halabiya. But do you remember that tradition?
Nabil Mohamedi recited in Tafsir in Surah al-Baqarah.
Yes, but still you are leading from one place to another, but you are not telling me. All right.
Just study from that place.
Yes. Anyway, there is another way of looking at it, that the Holy Quran, that is the most important authority on any subject. The Holy Quran refers to the building or rebuilding of Khana Kaaba by Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. The Holy Quran tells us, Inna awwala baytin wudi'a lin-nasi lallazi bi Bakkata Mubarakam wa hudam. The very first house was built for the sake of mankind, for the purpose of worship of Allah, that is Mubarakan Hudan lil Alameen. Now that shows that this was the very first house. And we know positively that Hazrat Ibrahim ﷺ was not the founder of this house at all, because it is mentioned that he was raising the obliterated, from the obliterated foundations. Yes. So that shows that the house belonged to a much earlier age. Now, if it was built at a much earlier age, there should have been some traditions and rites belonging to this house, and that means that Hajj dates back to much earlier period. And also, once I found out about the Hajj, the custom of Hajj, from other sources. I studied from the other sources, and encyclopedia in particular, and it told us that this is a custom which is a universal custom, and it is found everywhere in the world, in every people, and they have their own special meccas, localized places of Hajj. So this tradition is a worldwide universal tradition which has been inherited by the children of Adam from long ages before. So that seems to be one of the fundamentals of religion. Otherwise all these various people shouldn't have inherited. And if it was so, it was a fundamental feature of religion, then for the awwal abad that had to be there. So all these pointers present a forceful argument put together, if not individually, in favor of our believing that Hajj was performed at much earlier times than we think. And Khana Kaaba, whenever it was built for the first time, it was also used for the purpose of Hajj Baitullah. Later on, now the second part of your question, later on when, or even previously perhaps, whenever it was Khana Kaaba was invaded by infidels and captured by infidels, or let's say when the people became corrupted and the concept of unity of God gave way to the concept of many gods, ultimately the same place became the place of idol worship. And this is exactly how Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam found it. And at that time, the traditions of Hajj were also influenced by the people's religion. The result was that although they made the circuits all right, but they also worshipped their various idols, and also practiced some very profane customs. And those who had absolutely no place in God, for worship of God. For instance, people, the Arabs before Muhammad used to make circuits completely naked. And this was one of the customs which was put out by Muhammad forever, and he said that this is not going to be practiced again. And he chose Hazrat Ali karramallahu wajhahu ta'ala anhu to announce this to the Meccans, that from now on you will never be permitted to perform Hajj with your old customs. This is why Hazrat Imam Abu Hanifa and many other Muslim scholars of great worth have inferred that what Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam understood from the verse prohibiting the infidels to go near Mecca or near Baitullah was not a physical approach, but it was the religious approach that was forbidden. And this is why Hazrat Imam Abu Hanifa has openly said, said it in so many words, and some other scholars have also gone very close to this, and there was a debate between the old scholars. Some understood that verse to mean that infidels were physically prevented from approaching Baitullah, and this is why the present regime also, which is a Wahhabi regime and is very strict in following the word and letter, do not permit non-Muslims to go to Mecca, even if they are not infidels, and even if they are not idolaters, they are prevented. For that we have no authority. In fact, what happened was, as Hazrat Imam Abu Hanifa and many other scholars have inferred, that la yaqrabu do you remember? Anyway, I'll explain. I mean, I don't remember the verse exactly, but it is said that after this year, the verse was revealed after Hunain, and when Ahmad had returned to Medina. So it was said that after this year, the infidels shall not be permitted to go near Khana Kaaba, and they will never have access or possession of these places. This is the verse which I am referring to, and this verse has been variously interpreted by various people. Some infer that there is a total prohibition of physical approach, and they strictly follow this. And there are others who believe that this is not correct because it contradicts some other explanations of Ahmad himself. So it has to be a spiritual approach which is prohibited. And the order which was given by Ahmad explains this. They were forbidden from making circuits with the old customs. The same customs were forbidden to be revived. The result was that they were forbidden to go naked, they were forbidden to chant slogans or such religious expressions as would remind one of idolatry. So that was the real prevention. This is why once in this majlis, in answer to a question, I maintained the same position, and I still maintain the same position, despite the fact that some ME scholars pointed out that the verse is very clear on this point, that they should not be permitted to go near Khana Kaaba physically. But it's not so. It's not so clear as far as that goes. On the contrary, the same verse was quoted against physical approach to Ahmad by some of his companions, and he refuted this and said this is the incorrect meaning you have understood. So after that, what is left? Some non-Muslims entered Masjid al-Nabwi, which is a very sacred mosque, to say the least. It should stand, if not equal, second to Khana Kaaba, second I think to Khana Kaaba in importance, because Khana Kaaba was also built for Ahmad ultimately, and he performed his Hajj and Salat there. So after Khana Kaaba, if there was a sacred mosque, in degree I mean, every mosque is sacred otherwise, it was the closest to Khana Kaaba was Ahmad mosque. He permitted non-Muslims and also infidels, idolaters, to approach him in that mosque. And when questioned by Sahaba, the same verse was quoted by Sahaba, that is companions, that isn't it said in the Holy Quran, innamal mushrikuna najisun. So Ahmad said, yes, it is said. but it does not mean physical najis. It is the najis of the heart, and the najis of the heart does not make the physical being of a place filthy. It does not soil a physical thing. So how wise and how beautiful this observation is, that when Allah says najis, that is the najis of the heart and the najis of the mind, and that cannot translate itself into a physical reality and touch a physical being. So this is why Hazur Akram Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam permitted them to enter the mosque, but they were not permitted to perform their worship to idols. So that is the meaning, they should not be permitted to come near. That is, in essence, their customs should not be permitted to have a play in the same sacred place. Their religious rites should not be permitted. It should be kept clean from all concepts of idolatry. That is the meaning. So Ahmad Sallallahu stopped that as well. Any other question, or someone else would like to give him a break for a while? Yes? Abdullah Sahib, please. Acha, okay.
Assalamu alaikum. This is a question from a Christian friend of mine who says that God created all the prophets, brought different religions to this world, and every prophet brought his own religion and his own book, till the Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam brought Quran, and that was the end. We Muslims and Ahmadis, we believe that the Holy Quran is the last book and Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was the last prophet. But a Christian who believes in Bible says that whatever the Bible taught me, or Jesus Christ teaching, I believe in it. But why should I believe in Quran when God told me to believe in through Jesus Christ, to believe in the Bible? Why should I believe in your Quran? Nauzubillah, I had doubts about the God, that why he is changing his mind. Every time he sends a new prophet and says, we believe in this, and then Allah says,
right.
This is the question.
So what should be the answer to this question?
Yes, sir.
Have you thought of some answers yourself?
No,
Have you
really.
ever attempted to answer these questions?
No, really.
The answer should be very simple and straightforward. Why do not they still believe in the superstitions which were called science at the earlier ages, and reject the modern discoveries? Why have they changed their concepts about nature? Because they find the earlier concepts to be incorrect and the modern concepts to be correct. That is the simple way why people change. So the answer is that you should compare the teachings of the Holy Quran and the observations it has made on various aspects of nature, and compare them with the Bible and their observations made in various books of the Bible. And you will find that they are such hocus pocus as compared to the declarations of the Holy Quran, and so faulty and so contradictory to its own statements, that it's no longer a book to be reliable, to be considered reliable. So unless you make a comparative study of the Holy Quran and the Bible and know for yourself, you will not be able to cope with such a questioner. But even the non-Muslims have started pointing out these facts. There is a book written by a French scholar who has compared scientifically the observations made by the Holy Quran on certain aspects of nature and the observations made by the Bible on the same aspects of nature. And he points out categorically, repeatedly, and proves his point by the latest scientific authorities, by quoting the latest scientific authorities as well, that each time the Holy Quran is correct, and each time the Bible is either totally incorrect or mostly incorrect. No, that's just a minute. Let me finish first. And then he points out that the strange thing is that it's not that in majority of cases the Holy Quran is correct. Without exception, every time, without fail, the Holy Quran is correct, and even on those subjects on which Bible is completely silent. It speaks of such knowledge as was completely unavailable to the time of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and which was gradually being revealed to mankind through their studies for the next 1300 or 1400 years. And yet that knowledge was available to him. He said, this is absolutely fantastic. Nobody can believe in it to have originated from human beings. So what's the point now?
Now the point he makes is that, as you said, Hazur, that the comparing Quran and Bible, we find that the Bible is wrong, or it's hocus pocus, But he says that then God did provide the Bible.
No, this is not the attitude of the Holy Quran. This is again a very illogical attitude adopted by these people.
Yes.
You have to taught them like children. The fact is that the Holy Quran does not reject the earlier books, but with one modification in its statements, that the earlier books were originally revealed by God and they contained truth and nothing but the truth, though not the whole truth. That's another difference between them and the Holy Quran. But they were later on interpolated by human beings, and it was they who added falsehood to the truth. And now you find them as ruins. You can study the general plan and understand that originally they were of a high order, and they belong to the region of truth, the area of truth, but no longer so. For instance, if you go to a ruin of a great palace, from the ruin you can understand that originally it was built for a very useful purpose and it served the purpose while it stood intact. But you no longer can be protected even from rain, not to mention great armies today as you find them. So the Holy Quran does not say that these books were not revealed by God. It says they were revealed by God, all right, but they were changed by human beings, not by God. So what is the answer to this attitude?
That was my answer to him. That
was a very correct answer. So what was the answer, his answer to you as a rebuttal to this?
Quietness. When you don't have an answer to that.
So when you have already done all that, why were you asking?
No, because the details what you mentioned is now, I'll explain it now.
Very well, Jazakumullah.